Unfortunately, not every street in Austin is as peaceful as this one.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Over the last couple of decades, Austin has exploded with growth. And with growth comes great danger. So, yeah. In 2018, 35 pedestrians died in Austin. In 2019, 36 pedestrians died in Austin.
Action!
Unfortunately, since 2012, 2,400 pedestrians have been injured. Austin has a real problem with pedestrian safety. Lots of intersections have been improved though, like this one. Stay safe.
Wait to cross Lamar and 31st.
Okay, thank you. To understand the problem and or find some solutions, I've interviewed a couple of the city's top experts on the problem. Okay, so let's see, let me get my questions out. Okay, well, first, thank you for agreeing to talk to me. I'm really excited to hear about your input about this topic. And yeah, so first, what exactly is your job title, and could you describe your responsibilities that come along with it?
Yeah, so I am the executive director of a nonprofit called Farm and City. Farm and City is focused on the state of Texas, and those are kind of our boundaries. And we try to improve public policy in Texas, and we do that. We have a thing we say that we do it vertically and horizontally. And so vertically means that we work at all different levels of government, at the state, the county, city, and the metropolitan planning organizations, which is the regional transportation stuff, and sometimes with neighborhoods and down to the block. But then horizontally, that we work on several different issues. And so there's some programs. We have so Vision Zero Texas is our project, and that's the traffic safety. And we work across the state on that.
Could you maybe describe or define like the problem of pedestrian safety that faces the city of Austin?
Yeah. We have a basically traffic violence epidemic in America, but particularly in Texas. That the rates of people being hurt or killed in traffic in Texas are higher than a lot of other states. And then within that, there's particularly a pedestrian safety issue, and the rates of pedestrians being hurt and killed in Texas is worse than a lot of other states. And so in Austin, we have the same problem as the rest of the state. And so I don't know if I think it's, I don't want to guess the number, but I think it's something like 40 people die each year in the city of Austin as pedestrians. And then another, say 200 people have like serious injuries, which is kind of an important little detail. As a lot of times when people talk about safety and pedestrian safety, the number they talk about is the people who are killed, which is terrible. But a lot of people, there's like 5 times as many people are just hurt really bad. And like a serious injury means like a lifetime thing. Like you lost a limb, you're always going to be in a wheelchair, or you have brain damage. And so there's a lot more people that are hurt that way. So, so that's the problem. And there's different reasons why people are hurt when they're walking or using a wheelchair. Some of it has to do with the design of our roadways. Some of it has to do with different laws. And so it's a big problem.
Yeah. And yeah, it is. And how can like I as a citizen help out at all in this project?
Well, so there's different ways. So one is all of us have to be responsible when we're using the transportation system. So when we're driving or walking or riding a bike, being safe is important. And there's you know, a lot of things like distracted driving is an example. People making phone calls while they're actually driving a car. And so
Mhm.
all of us practicing safer is one thing. But then there is part of it is, to some extent, traffic crashes, we're kind of all numb to it. Like it just keeps happening and people keep being hurt.
Yeah.
And so to some extent, having a voice and saying, no, this is a problem, like we need to fix
Yeah.
it, is actually a very
Mhm.
important thing. And it's very important to
Yeah.
have people like you, and people saying, no, this is a problem, and bringing it up and like sort of calling on our governments and everybody else to be safe and to fix these things. So let's see. So from the point of view of what you can do, there's sort of like there's activism and there's helping solve the problem, but then there's also all of us being safer.
Yeah. Doing your part.
Yeah.
And how can kids like my age help? If you're not like, if you're my age, how can you help?
Right.
Like a middle school.
Let's see. So, you know, there's some amount of like there is, the city of Austin has a safe routes to schools program. And they've just finished up studies on every single school in Austin. I'm fairly sure it's not just AISD, but also every private school, but that might be worth checking. And so like your school most likely has a safe routes to school plan. And it could be possible that like kids at your school could talk to your school leaders about that plan and say like, we want to help push it forward, or we want to, like, the plan might say like we should fix the sidewalks or put in a safe crossing or do things like that around your school. And so you guys could actually be engaged with that. There is a kind of a fun, in the world of traffic safety, there's a thing called tactical urbanism. And across the world, a lot of people, like communities or just groups of people, have just gone out and tried to fix things. And so they'll do things like, if there's supposed to be a crosswalk and it's missing, they'll get permission or not get permission to go just paint the crosswalk. And so that might be what could be a really cool thing for people your age to do, is to like work with your school to say, are there things from this safe routes to school proposal that we could just go do? Could we go, like get the city to support you doing it? But could we go paint a crosswalk? And could we go put up a sign, or is there something that we could actually do as a project around our school to make it safer to walk around the school?
Yeah.
So
that sounds like something a middle school boy or middle school kid could handle.
Yeah.
What has caused a rise in traffic and like pedestrian deaths in Austin in the last couple of years and a few years?
Right. Well, there's different theories. There's national studies that try to figure out why pedestrian deaths are going up across the nation. One of the interesting conclusions is that one of the factors is the size of our personal vehicles has been increasing, and really specifically SUVs and pickup trucks, where the front of the vehicle is a lot taller than they used to be. And so it's kind of weird that if you have a little car and you run into a person and their car hits their knees, it's not going to be fun for that person, but they're maybe less likely to die. Whereas if you have a car that hits someone in their sort of gut, in their organs, you're much more likely to die. And so there is part of the increase has to do with all of us buying bigger and bigger cars. So that's one. And to some extent, places like Austin are growing, and the region adds 70,000 new people every year. And so if we keep doing things the same way and the rate of traffic deaths stays the same, we're adding more people, so more people are going to die. although we could basically use that growth and that economic development to fix our system and make it safer for everybody.
Yeah.
And I guess we do a lot of work on lobbying the Texas legislature. There's a lot of Texas laws that could be fixed. And I guess I'll just give you one example, which the legislature meets every 2 years. And they met last year, and they're going to meet next year, next January. And so we're trying to get them to pass what we call the Stop for Pedestrians bill. And so currently in Texas, if you're driving a car and there's a person walking in a crosswalk where they're supposed to be there and they're allowed, the driver of the car has to yield to the pedestrian, which means that you don't actually have to stop. You can sort of keep rolling, but you're not supposed to hit somebody. But the truth is that people end up getting hit, and it also makes it harder to tell who is at fault. And so it's sort of funny that this bill we want to pass only changes, like adds this one word, and it says you should stop and yield. But there's other states have done this and found that it actually reduced deaths, that by telling people that you not only have to yield, you have to actually stop and not, if there's a person walking across the street, you need to stop. So that's one example of how fixing our laws could actually save lives.
But what, if any, has the electric scooters, what role have they played in the death of Austin, like pedestrians?
Well, that's highly debatable. I believe as of now, there was one person who was killed while they were riding a scooter. But there have been really significant complaints from a pedestrian point of view about the scooters. And so if, basically people leaving the scooters on sidewalks, and that makes it like if you're in a wheelchair, you can get stuck where you can't move forward. To people like zooming by on the sidewalk really fast in a scooter. And so there are real issues there that I think the city has done a fairly good job of trying to fix those issues. There's sort of a fun, I think it's just really interesting. The techies think that they'll be able to figure out how to use geocoding to like map out where all the sidewalks are in the city, and to have the scooters be able to tell where they are. And so that if you're on a sidewalk, it won't go faster than 5 miles an hour.
Wow.
And so you won't be able to.
That sounds pretty kind of advanced.
Right. And so it's kind of an awesome solution to that problem. So there is another side of that, though, is that part of the pedestrian safety issue in Austin is that we all have to drive too much, and that people of Austin drive more than the people of Houston actually, on average. And so
there's
doing
like
things
no
like
subways or like kind of
And so to some extent, if the scooters allow people to say adopt a transit lifestyle, and so that if they need it, they can get a scooter, or to not drive a big car, that actually can make the whole city safer if more people have options to do things without having to drive a car. So
are there any other cities out there that are kind of like role models that we can kind of learn from in like the sense of traffic or pedestrian safety that have a problem as well?
Right. There are some good examples. I'll give you sort of two things. Is that the whole Vision Zero movement really started in the Scandinavian countries. And so Sweden, I think, was the first one, whereas a whole country, they set a goal to end traffic deaths. But then all the other Scandinavian countries. And so they've been doing they've changed the whole way their cities are built. And so there's a lot of great examples. And basically, simplistic examples, if Amsterdam, just everybody can ride bikes everywhere. And it's
Yeah.
just amazing how many people ride bikes in Amsterdam. And so that does, you have less cars to run into you. So that is significantly makes it safer. But then in America, New York City has really been the leader in this. And they have done some really great things to make it safer for pedestrians. So it's sort of, there's some amount of laws, like they have automated speed enforcement around all their schools. And so if you're speeding really fast around the school, you get a ticket, like automatically. And that's everywhere in New York City. But then they've also done a lot of redesigning the street to make it better sidewalks and better crosswalks and things to make it safer. The key is that over the last 5 years, the pedestrian deaths in New York City have significantly gone down. Well, in the rest of the country, they've gone up.
That sounds like a good system, like with the schools, like like an automatic ticket if you speed, so people will stop. And lastly, do you have any advice for like Austin pedestrians to stay safe, like how they could stay safe on the roads? Like,
well, so it is always good to be safe, just like you would do anything else. So, you know, a lot of pedestrians who are hurt while like running across the street in the middle of the street. Although there is a whole part of this movement that we don't want to blame the victims too much. And so a lot of times people like say, oh, well, that person was just running across the street. But then if you go look at a map, you realize that there was no safe place to get across the street for like a mile. But it's important for people to know that that's one of the most dangerous things people do is running across a road, you know, in the middle where there's not a crosswalk. I guess just avoiding that if you can.
Running.
So
well, thank you so much for taking the time to interview, and I really enjoyed that, and I'll use a lot of that information on my project. So
okay, great. Well, thank
you so much.
I'm excited you're interested in this and doing the project. So
okay.
And if you decide to have a group at your school try to do some tactical urbanism, let me know. And we'll help.
Will. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend. Bye.
You too. Bye. What is your exact job title, and could you describe your responsibilities for me?
Austin Transportation Department, and I'm with the City Vision Zero program, which is our traffic safety program.
Okay. Could you define the problem or challenges about like pedestrian safety that face the city of Austin?
Yeah, so a lot of people are moving to Austin, as you know, and the city's growing very quickly. And a lot of those people want to walk more or need to walk because they don't own a car or things like that. So, you know, we have a city was a lot of it was built for cars to allow cars to go fast and to move quickly. But a lot of times that creates a situation where it's not very friendly for pedestrians. So, you know, cars are going really fast, or there's a long way to cross the street. Sometimes you have to walk really far out of your way to get to a traffic signal or a crosswalk or things like that. So a lot of the challenges we face as a city are related to how we built our streets originally. And so a lot of areas aren't very walkable. Some areas that are pretty walkable, like downtown or like South Congress or some of our neighborhood streets, but there's also a lot of streets that aren't very walkable or pedestrian friendly. So we're having to go back as a transportation department to rethink how we design those streets and redesign them to make them safer.
Yeah. How can I as a citizen help in any way?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different ways. I mean, we have some groups in town who are advocacy organizations who try to make Austin a more walkable city. So there's a group called Walk Austin, who does a lot of work trying to get the city to do more. They organize different community groups to help define where improvements could be made, and they help elected officials who support walkability. So you can get involved with those groups. We also have a monthly meeting at City Hall that brings together city staff and community members to talk about pedestrian issues. And that's called the Pedestrian Advisory Council. They meet every Monday, the first Monday of each month at City Hall. And there's a website for that group. And that's a really good way to understand all the different issues that are happening, not just around pedestrian safety, but just making Austin a more walkable city in general. So things like building out sidewalks or, slowing down cars so it's not so dangerous. And it's a good way to have a conversation between the community and city staff who are working on these projects every day.
Yeah, that sounds like a good way for someone like do you think someone like my age could do something like that? Like, how can kids my age help out as well?
Yeah, you would totally fit in there. Like, it's a really diverse group. It's all ages of people who want to make Austin a more walkable city, and so they would love to have you there. And it's a really like informal environment. We just kind of have a conversation. You're free to bring up any topic you want and propose new ideas, and staff is there to listen and to provide feedback and things like that. So yeah, I can send you some information on that. That'd be a really good way to get involved. I think also just kind of staying in touch with like the news, like local news, in terms of like what's happening at city council. So you can actually tune in to city council meetings online. They host every other Thursday. They have a city council meeting, and it's not always related to like transportation or walkability, but oftentimes they have different agenda items where they're talking about different things, or they're voting on different laws that they want to enact to improve walkability. And there's also an opportunity for the public to have 3 minutes to talk about whatever they want to. So you can sign up and you have a chance to talk directly to the mayor and city council members about any topic that you want to. So that'd be another opportunity. What
role, if any, have electric scooters played in the death of pedestrians in Austin, or pedestrian safety?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we've only had one death of a person riding a scooter, but that's something that we're definitely keeping track of, and we're trying to make it safer. People on scooters are a little different than pedestrians just because they're going so much faster. So we're trying to figure out the best way to allow people to use scooters, but not make it less safe for people walking on sidewalks. So we've implemented new like city codes that require scooters to ride in a safe way when they're on a sidewalk and yield to pedestrians. And we're also trying to build out like our bike network, so bike lanes and things like that, to allow scooters to have a safe place to scoot and not interfere with pedestrians. So it's definitely something that's like evolving and changing really quickly. And Austin is actually one of the leaders in the country in terms of number of scooters and number of companies that are here. And we have just incredible leadership on those scooters. And we have a whole kind of group of our staff who is dedicated to figuring out how to make that work.
Are there any cities like not Austin that we can kind of learn from, like a role model that kind of demonstrates well how to keep pedestrians safe? Or is there any cities that we can learn from that have made kind of have the same problem we do?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, there's definitely a lot of cities that have the same problems that Austin does. And a lot of the worst cities are kind of in the south or southwest or southeast of the country, where there's the cities aren't as built out and they're not as old, so they weren't really built around pedestrians really. But some really good cities in the U.S. that we try to model our policies after. Seattle is one of the most walkable cities in the U.S. Portland, Oregon, and then definitely some of the older cities in the Northeast, like New York City. They have really good public transportation and really wide sidewalks and things like that. Obviously, New York City is a very different kind of city than Austin is. But I think if you're looking for some kind of a similar city to what Austin is, or who we try to model it after, I'd say Portland or Seattle are two really good examples. Looking to them to see what they're doing and kind of borrow things from them to apply in Austin. Yeah, so Vision Zero started in, I think it was Sweden in the 1990s. And it really had a lot of success there and some other European countries. And only in the last 5 or 10 years has it come to the United States. And I'd say around 2014 or something like that is when it really started to take off here in the US. Starting with New York City was one of the first US cities to adopt it. And then Austin in around 2015 and 2016 is when we officially made our Vision Zero goal for the city. And now we have a program within the transportation department, and there's 4 full-time staff that are working on that all the time. Yeah.
And lastly, do you have any advice for Austin pedestrians to stay safe on the roads?
Yeah, I mean, kind of the basic advice you hear from your parents, look both ways before you cross the street, things like that are pretty obvious. But, one thing is to keep in mind that a lot of times, if you're crossing the street, cars can't see you sometimes, especially at night. There's certain areas of town where we don't have great street lighting. So, even if you think that you can make it across the street, sometimes cars, they can't even see you. So that's something I would recommend. And then just always try to cross at a crosswalk. A lot of times there maybe isn't a crosswalk available, but those are the areas where our engineers have, marked off to show that it's the safest place to cross. So those would be my recommendations.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to interview with me. And I had one more question. I was wondering what flag that is on your screensaver.
Oh yeah, that's the city's seal. So it's kind of cut off a little bit, but yeah.
That's
so those are the
cool.
You'll see that on the flags around town and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Have a nice weekend.
Yeah, you too.
Okay. It is a wonderful place to visit and live in. Many people come here each year and have a great time. But for the pedestrian safety problem to be solved, many drivers and pedestrians have to stay safe and careful on the roads.